All right.
Yay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Anita Brown.
And I'm Jill Johns.
I have a really hard time saying my
Your
name
name.
all the time. Can I be named something different?
What would you like to be?
It's something easy to say, like Kara or something. Can I just be Kara? That's
Kara
amazing.
Brown?
Kara.
Okay. Hi, Kara.
Hi.
Jill. What are they listening to?
This is the Pause Button 2.0 podcast.
Yes, and we are here to upgrade your self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Today we are debunking the myth of the perfect parent.
Yes, we're talking about the pressures of parenting and how that fucks with our self-care
And it's ridiculous.
and our minds.
We will not succumb.
Makes me cry.
Yeah, and we might make Kara cry
We
today.
might.
But it would be Kara crying.
That's right, not
Anita.
Anita, or however she
Alter
says
ego.
her name.
Anita Brown.
So,
Yeah, parenting is something I didn't want to be.
really?
No. I had zero intent of being a mother. Didn't want to be one. Had no interest in being one. And now I am the mother of 4. So see how well that went for me.
Never say never.
Careful what you wish for, you'll get the opposite. Yeah, so I didn't want to be a parent because I didn't know how I was going to take care of other people and take care of myself at the same time, and it seemed like an insurmountable task.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not equipped whatsoever for doing any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I always assumed I would be a mom. I didn't always assume I would have a husband, but I kind of assumed I'd be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I got married, I did not want kids.
Okay.
And then we both didn't want kids for like 6 years.
Okay.
And then suddenly we both got a Jonesin' for kids.
Oh, you got the itch.
Yep.
That needed to be scratched.
Yep,
And
it
it scratched
did.
her.
Then we got a
Scratched
kid.
it twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And how did things change?
So, suddenly, I mean, obviously your time's not your own anymore. Feeling.
Mm-hmm.
We were only going to be parents to one kid, and then we surprisingly got another one.
Okay.
So, and that was actually a lot easier. I always envisioned myself being a mom to like a 4-year-old. You know, like I couldn't imagine the baby stages.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like I really sucked at the baby stages with Lindsay, my oldest one. And then with Alex, since I kind of knew what the drill was, it was a lot easier. He got the really chill version of mom than Lindsay got.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so then, I mean, like I wanted kids then, and you know, it was easier with Alex as a baby. And then once Lindsay got to like around that 4-year-old, you know, thing, I kind of felt like a more natural mom. But I still judged myself a lot. We talked about in some episodes, and I can't remember which one, about our job is not to make our kids happy. And how my mom always, it was like her drive in life to make sure we were happy, or she just wanted us to be happy, and how that backfired with me. And then how you can end up feeling like such a failure as a parent if your kids aren't happy. And I inherited that gene. It like was like stamped on me like one of those like things you put on cattle.
Branded.
Yeah, I got branded with this like you will make your kids happy imprint. And so I kind of have been like, my kids have to be happy, and if they're not, then I have personally failed as a parent. And so there's a lot of ways that I have failed as a parent. Because things just didn't go as planned. Like I envisioned that we would be living in a certain kind of town, not in the South. I envisioned that my kids would be more active than they are. I envisioned that they'd be eating different than they are, and that we'd be doing things as a family different than what we're doing. So I envisioned all these things, and partly they were like my desires of like what family should be. But then also it kind of seems like that's what society says family should be. You know, like kids shouldn't be in front of computers or television or whatever. And mine live in front of a computer, basically.
Right.
And so I feel like I'm failing there. And kids need to eat well-balanced meals. And my kids eat processed food. I'm failing there. And it is like completely up to me to make these kids be a certain way. And that's just like such bullshit.
Right.
And it's like part of me knows that that's bullshit, but when somebody confronts me with a, well, your kids need to be doing this instead, then it's really hard for me to say to that person, like, fuck off. Even though I really want to. But internally it touches on this part of me that feels like a failure. And then I feel like really offended that they've said that, instead of just being like, oh, that's that person's opinion, they're entitled to it.
Right.
But since it like kind of pokes at a part of me that already feels like a failure,
Inadequate, yeah.
then it is like exponentially like this horrible feeling.
So what do we do? How do we keep ourselves from feeling like we're failing?
How do we? So right now where I am with this is I have to remind myself a lot that, you know, if my mom ever felt like she was failing in certain ways, that's like, I can't look at myself as a failure. You know, it's like if she felt like she was failing as a parent because of maybe I wasn't happy, that would kind of mean that I'm a failure, right? And so, and I don't think that I'm a failure.
Right.
And so then obviously she's wrong. And so I really feel like it doesn't matter how I might kind of how I think I'm fucking up as a parent. If I am giving my kids tools at least to process, adapt, make up their own mind about shit, then they're going to get to a place in their life where they will, you know, everyone's going to have process shit about their child that they need to process out.
We will all go to therapy for different reasons.
We all should. And so then I just have to trust that like they are going to get to a point in their life where they'll figure this shit out. They'll make decisions that they need to make for themselves.
Yeah, where to even start with the guilt? So, I mean, I feel guilty just from the very get-go. I cried the first 5 months that I was pregnant because I wasn't one of those people that was like, I don't want to have kids, and then I get pregnant and I'm like, oh, but it's a hidden blessing. Like, I got pregnant and cried and cried every day for the first 4 months of my pregnancy. Like cried, like laid on the floor in my apartment in the fetal position, crying because I truly felt like I was condemned to this life sentence of hell. Like it wasn't like it wasn't like a get over it quickly and move on kind of thing. And then I think it was about like the 5-month ultrasound or whatever when I realized that there really was like a human being living inside of me that could sense and feel everything that I was sensing and feeling, that I got to this place of like, I need to knock that shit off. Like, just for the well-being of this thing that's living inside of me, I need to quit like behaving and acting like this is awful. And so, but ever since then, it's like I have never really wanted to like be what everybody else thinks a parent should be, and like I didn't want to succumb to the cookie cutter version of parenting. I mean, I think even in the construct of how our family was arranged, it's like I went to work and my husband stayed home and was the stay-at-home dad, and I was the working mom, and so there was a ton of like social shaming for that for me. Like, what's wrong with you as a mom that you want to go to work and don't want to stay home with your kids? Like, what's wrong with your husband that he doesn't want to go to work? Like, you know, there was there was all this stuff that like went into it. And then once I had one child, I was like, well, I really can't just have one. That's not right. That's not fair. Like, it needs a playmate or whatever. So I felt like obligated to have a second. And then the kids were young and we got divorced, and so now on top of like not wanting to be a mom and feeling guilty about having been like crying the first 5 months of my pregnancy, then I brought another child into the world and we decided to get divorced, and so now I'm like exponentially fucking these two little beings up, and I'm like, see, like from the beginning I didn't think I should be a parent, and now I am a parent, and now all this shitty stuff is happening, and then to the top of that, then adding in being a step parent to somebody else's children, who I'm like, I don't want to be a mom in the first place. I'm not even a good mom to my own children, and now I'm supposed to be the mom to somebody else's children, and oh, by the way, these other children don't even like me. Like, at least my kids like me. So like my relationship with being a parent has been very messed up, but like I love being a mom now. I love my kids. Like I have a great relationship with my kids. I have a lot of fun with my kids. Once I got over this whole bullshit of like what a mom is supposed to look like, what's a stepmom supposed to look like what's a professional mom supposed to look like, all that kind of stuff. And I just like kind of said like, fuck it. Like I don't need to do this anybody else's way. I just need to figure out like how to do it my way and then do my way really well. It completely shifted my dynamic with my kids and my relationship with my kids once I let go of what I thought everybody else needed me to do in order to be a good mom.
Was that a one-time let go, or is that like a waffling?
Every day.
Like, oh, I have
Every
it again.
day.
How did I get this again?
It was more like you have got to quit worrying about the way other people are doing it, and you've just got to figure out what's going to work for you, and you've got to like turn a blind eye almost to like what everybody else is doing. Like don't read the mommy blogs, like don't go to the mommy and me classes, like don't even like to some degree like hang out with other moms. And like the one thing that always pissed me off was when moms were bragging about like when their kid was walking or when their kid was eating with a spoon or whatever. It's like my first child was born with a full head of hair, and so I started being kind of a bitch and bragging about like, look at my kid got all kinds of, because it was like you're bragging about when your kid's walking and that has nothing to do with you. It's just their like biology, and like they just figured it out, and by the time they go to kindergarten, like they all have hair, they all walk, they all go to the bathroom, they all eat. Like let's quit like bragging about the milestones and the arrival of the milestones.
Well, so moms, it seems like then in those instances, like moms are basically identifying themselves as good or bad based on their kids,
based on the milestones that their kids do. And I saw those milestones as being completely independent from the mom, right? Like it wasn't my doing that Zach had hair,
right?
It was like
but you bragged about it at first, but so when
no,
did you
I was bragging about it to be a bitch, like to be facetious, like
so right
your
away.
kid's walking but my kid has hair, why doesn't your, like
that?
that.
Yeah. So immediately upon motherhood, you were like, I'm not even going to buy into this shit.
I didn't want to.
I didn't read any mom blogs. I didn't read childhood, like childing books or whatever. Like I didn't read any of those things about like how to be the parent or anything, but I had these ideas already in my head of like what it's supposed to be. And maybe part of it is like what my needs are as a family.
Right.
Or something. I don't know. But so I still had these, part of me would be like, my oldest one didn't walk until he was like 18 or 19 months. And at, a year, the doctor's like,
developmental milestone.
Yeah, next month we might need to look at physical therapy. And we're like, fuck that. No, we just won't bring him in. Thanks. And like, he'll walk in his own time. And It's fine.
Right.
And, probably sometimes that's not fine, but it ended up being fine. He walked at 18 months or 19 months. And then I had a friend who was a speech pathologist, and so, or therapist, whatever they're called. And she was like, if he doesn't learn to walk, then he's not going to learn to talk. I was like, fuck, really? And so then I had somebody worrying about whether or not he was going to talk. And then my mother-in-law is always, early on, she was always kind of like interjecting these worries, these concerns about the kids or something. And so whenever, it's like, I would be fine until somebody be like suddenly introducing this worry or concern that they had about my kids. And that would really piss me off. I guess because it was really, I could easily ignore what I thought was supposed to happen until somebody else brought it to my attention that they're worried about it. I had a friend one time, with my oldest one, we're in and out of like homeschooling, public schooling, whatever. And at one point, he was being homeschooled with a state online program, right? So he was like on online learning at home. And so one of my friends started asking me about that program. And I was thinking, oh, she's interested in it for her own kids or whatever, for the future or whatever. And so I was telling her about it, and then it ended up being like more questions about, well, when's he getting socialized? That's just my worry about, homeschooling is the socialization factor. And so it ended up being like not about Her. It ended up being about concerns about my kid, like, and how I'm fucking parenting my kid, and the choices that I'm making for my kid, and that really infuriates me because in a way I kind of feel like if I don't talk about it, then I'm fine. But once people start telling me in some sideways way that I'm not parenting my kids right,
like with me with the cancer, like the faux concern, but they're trying to like interject their
expertness on parenting.
Well, I think that's exactly what you're alluding to there, is that as a parent, you are the expert of your own self, right? Like you might not be a child rearing expert or like a child development expert or a speech pathologist or whatever, but it's like if you get quiet and like ignore the external chatter from the doctors and the friends and the in-laws and whatever, and just like start to ask yourself, like, what works for us? Like, what works for me? What works for my relationship with my child? And can like tune out what the other people are saying. I think that's the secret sauce to being a parent, you know?
I agree with you.
Or at least for me.
I agree with you. There was a point, like, I think it was really a year ago in December, I was taking this online, one of these like workshop, online webinar-y types of classes that run like for 6 weeks or something. And I can't remember even really what the topic was about, but what I remember about getting from that was realizing, with my oldest particularly, because he's gone through periods where he's withdrawn or had some like rage inside that he just kept in there, and I felt like a failure right at that moment. And it was during that class I realized that me continuing to think that I failed means that I'm looking at him as a failure. And that was like that hurt me really bad.
I'm sure.
And so I realized that
because you don't see him as a failure.
No, I don't think that I do. I mean, like, but some part of me thinks that kind of behavior or whatever is a failure, and maybe it's from my growing up where I kind of felt like a failure if I wasn't happy. So I've really had to, like, my being a good parent is reprogramming that internal dialogue to where like his spectrum of emotions are not failure if he's not only experiencing one emotion. It's not a failure. And so I agree with you. I think that good parenting for me is, and honestly for anybody, is really getting close to your own soul and being aware of what's going on in your own internal dialogue, and then giving yourself space and giving your child space
to figure their own stuff out.
Yeah.
Well, and I think of, so we have 4 that we raise, and each one is so unique and so different that I think about, like, if I was trying to be the perfect parent for each one of them independently, if ever all 4 of them were in the same room at the same time, and as a parent I was having to make sure I was perfect for all 4 of them, I as an individual would be completely erased, because I would just be being this like weird shapeshifter trying to like capitulate to every one of them. And so I've tried more than anything just to like stand solid as myself in the middle of these human beings, and like give of them pieces of myself that they might be able to leverage for their own journey, and then recognize that they're getting different things from their dad and different things from, the different players in their life, and realizing that like they're just learning one subset of skills from me, right? They're also learning skills from their parents and their other parents and their teachers and their friends and other adults in their lives, and their like small group leaders at church, or this, it's like they're getting all of these snippets of different people, and like releasing in me this requirement of like, it's my responsibility to create these humans who are then going to go out into the world. It's more like I, being me, can have an influence over their experience, and they might learn from it and take some of that with them as like a piece of me with them as they go forward. I like that view of parenting a lot more than feeling like I'm like responsible for them.
That reminds me of our conversation about the expert and how that mosaic happens when you like take all the pieces from these experts and then like make it your own picture. But being able to like teach your kids to do that, and then trusting that they do.
Yeah.
And I think early on in my parenting, my oldest one, I was like this helicopter mom who, like, always, like, we have a joke in my house, like, I'm always saying, careful. Like, so I brought it to their attention, like, I'm always saying careful. So now it's like a joke every time I say careful. It's like, oh, I did it again. And but that's like constantly this thing of like constantly saying careful, careful. And if the children are hearing that, then they're, I don't know, in some way they're thinking like,
I don't have good judgment.
yeah, they're not trusting themselves. And so my parenting now is like this reversal of like, okay, laugh when you say careful, first of all, laugh it off, and then say like, oh gosh, what am I even thinking? That's so ridiculous. Of course, I trust you. The other day, my oldest was like peeling potatoes, and like I want him to help in the kitchen more, like just learn this life skill of cooking. So I had him peel potatoes, and he's like, I don't know how to hold it. I'm like, dude, basically you need to peel it. I know you'll figure it out. This is how I hold it. You'll figure out how the best way to hold it is for you. He was like cutting a pie and saying like, I don't know how to do this. I'm like, nobody knows how to cut pie. Just start peeling. Think about what you want to see. It'll cut and just get it on your plate and it'll be okay. So I noticed myself trying to use the words trust, like I trust you, more often and then honoring that. Like,
well, and I, in our workbook, we use language that says, let's see what happens if, like, that's been the approach that I've been trying to take with my kids, which is it sounds like what you're saying too, something similar, where it's like, you go do this thing and then let's see what happens if you do this, or let's see what happens when you do that, versus this like box of expectations where I think like they're going to do something perfectly the first time. It's more like, here, go try this and let's see what happens. And then afterwards we can figure it out from there.
Yeah.
I kind of have this belief with parenting, and it's kind of been my framework, is that if I'm dictating everything for my kids and really clamping down, and I think it's because I observe the parents of some of my kids' friends who are like super still helicopter moms or like super in their kids' business, it's like I have this belief that like they have to learn critical thinking skill set and like thinking for themselves when they're still under my roof, so that when they leave my roof, they have the skill set to carry forward with them. But if I'm always making every decision for them when they're under my roof, like, and then they're no longer under my roof, then they're going to flounder and fail, and like the implications could be so much grander. Like, I'd rather they figure it out when I'm still around to like help them do like the debrief afterwards, or to help them talk about it, versus like constantly be dictating to them like what they need to be doing, what's right, like telling them step by step, and more like give them the boundary to work in, and then letting them go kind of figure it out. I really want my kids at 18 or 22ish, when they're officially gone, to like feel like they can do life.
Yeah, completely
like fly.
capable.
Yes, fly,
Right.
little birdie. I don't feel any sort of like bolstering, thinking, ooh, my children need me. My children need me to make these decisions for them. I don't get any sort of gratification at all from having my kids be dependent on me. I get a lot of gratification from thinking about them being able to be completely independent.
I think what you're talking about, though, that need that we sometimes have for people to need us is like a process to work that shit out. Because that is an actual, like, we would be getting our meaning for who we are
Self-worth.
is coming from somebody else needing us. Yeah, so
Right.
it really talks into self-worth.
Yeah.
And that kind of controlling piece of, controlling people or something so that we feel needed.
I would hate to put that pressure on my kids to have my self-worth be wrapped up in them toward me.
I mean, I get it. I think, but it's such a subconscious need that it's almost like it needs to become conscious, and then it needs to be not judged, and then it needs to be processed and let go. Like, because I think that probably my self-worth was wrapped up in people needing me to do stuff. Maybe not as bad as I see somebody else, but I mean, we always recognize it in other people, when it's a little bit in us.
Yeah.
So I think that piece of self-worth and what are we wrapping our self-worth up in is a it has to be a gentle process of awareness, and then don't judge it.
Yeah.
And then just
Don't judge it.
think about how much it's serving you and serving others. And I mean, I really needed to go to therapy to figure out my self-worth. That was not a thing where I can just think about it and be like, oh, I'm doing that. Okay, well, I won't do that anymore. It was a
You had to
bigger,
deconstruct it.
It
and
was,
then
yeah,
reframe it.
yeah. And breaking that shit down is like scary.
Painful.
Yeah, because the stuff that builds that stuff up is like protecting us from really sad emotions, probably like grief or something. I think because it's protecting us from something that maybe that we didn't get.
Yeah.
Or something.
So I'm wondering if maybe because I never wanted to be a mom in the beginning, made it so that I didn't put my self-worth at being a mom.
Speaking of being a mom,
Is that your baby?
what were you saying?
I have no
Say
idea.
it again.
Oh, I'd never wanted to be a mom. And so I don't feel, maybe it's like I never have wrapped my self-worth around my role as a mom.
Maybe.
I've always had a little bit of a detachment.
You know, but I've seen it in the same people who do it with their children probably are doing it with their spouses, they're doing it with their friends. Like they're always, I guess maybe it's a spectrum of like how badly into this are you, or how, I don't want to say badly, how wrapped up in this are you?
Yeah.
Because when we continue, I know this is like this is a whole different conversation.
Lean in, yeah. Because I don't wrap my self-worth in
And
some of
so it's like when we are always the one having to fix our friends, or always having to drop everything to go fix anything. I don't think it's just our kids. I think that when it's our kids, it's also our spouses, it's also our friends, and then it's our jobs. I think that.
To be the fixer.
To be the fixer.
Gosh.
Huh. But before we got into the fixer, I had something I was going to say. Let's review our conversation. What were we talking about?
Right before that, we were talking about therapy.
Yeah, we were talking about the self-worth thing. Wrapping up our identity in that shit. Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't either.
I mean, I don't remember. I was like, when you were talking, I was thinking, okay, wait, so I don't interrupt you.
You can interrupt me, because I interrupt you all the time.
All right, but we got to the fixer part.
We did.
And then what?
You know, so let's think about what we just said.
All right, so we were talking about
Parenting
wrapping our whole identity up
and parenting.
in being, and I kind of like identifying who we are as a person, as a mom now, based on what our kids are doing.
Yeah.
And how if they're not doing right things, then we're suddenly
We
not
feel,
right.
and how we view that we really want them to be independent and able to
Right.
fly the coop
Yeah.
when they get to that age and not need us.
Okay, yes, now I have it.
Good.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay, so when you were talking about the teaching them under your roof how to be a person out of your roof, basically, right? That's like that time is our parenting time, is like training our kids up,
Yes.
right? And so that got me thinking about how at every stage of parenting, like how I needed to get with the program. Like my kid's older now, they don't need me to do that for them anymore. And like for instance, this is like huge to me. When my oldest was like 11, my husband and I still like tag teamed who was at the house when the kids were at home, or him. Like if he was home alone, like who's going to be at the house with him? And it took me going to, I took my kids up to Minnesota to visit my parents for Christmas. And I visited my cousin who had like a 12-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 7-year-old, I don't know, something like that, right? But the oldest one was like 12-ish, 11, 12, 13, something like that, right? And so we were going to go have breakfast. So I went to her house. I don't have my kids, my parents do. So I'm like, it's just me, and we're going to go have breakfast.
Woo.
And so she's like, okay. And then she's like, all right, kids, I'll see you in a while. And I'm like, do you have a nanny here? And she's like, no. And I was like, is the dad coming back? She's like, no. And I'm like, Wait, you're just leaving your kids alone in the house? You're going away from it? What? She's like, Anita, like, my oldest is totally old enough. He's been doing this since he was 11. I was like, I have an 11-year-old. I was like, wait, this is possible. And it was almost like this, like, I needed to be hit over the head. Like, this is possible now. Like, your kid is old enough to stay home alone.
Mm-hmm. And maybe watch the younger sibling.
Right. So, I mean, I had to, like, get with it with this like, oh, my kid is old enough, and I need him to take on this responsibility because he needs to learn it.
Yeah, it's good for him.
So that change, I mean, that change was like huge in our life. I was like, Scott, he can be staying home alone. What do you think? Like, what have we been doing?
How did Scott feel about it?
He was like, yeah, there's no reason why he needs to have somebody home, really. So
I was a latchkey kid. I walked home from school by myself.
I was walking to school and walking home in second grade.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's like 8.
Yes. And so,
and we didn't have cell phones. And we didn't have GPS trackers.
Right. I mean, we didn't have those things. So, and I was like, and I lived. So, I told my son, I was like, so we're going to get you a phone so that you can stay home alone. And he didn't want to. He was like, well, I don't think I want to. We're like, no, you are going to do this. Like, this is not an option. Like, you're going to do this. Yeah. And he was totally fine. I mean, they've been totally fine. So these stages, like recognizing when our duty of protecting our kid, whatever, has kind of like, it's done now, and they can now go a little from the nest.
Well, and I think it's even the like flip side of like the disservice of not giving your kids some of that freedom and autonomy and decision making ability and the ability to like practice, like with training wheels. Like, you don't just take your kid and give them like a 10-speed bike and push them down the hill. It's like you start them on the driveway with like a little bike and lots of training wheels, and eventually you raise the wheels and then get them a bigger bike. Like, I think that same philosophy is true of like responsibility and, you know, life skills or whatever. It's like, I don't want my kid riding with training wheels his whole life, but I also don't want to wait till he turns 18 and then put him on a bike and push him out of the driveway either. Like, how can you constantly be like maybe pushing your own boundaries of what's comfortable as far as giving some, you know, autonomy or giving some responsibility, but with the end goal of like really looking like, okay, by the time they leave the house at 18, I want them to be able to do, you know, these 10 major life skills well, and so I got to give them the chance to practice those while they're still with me.
Yeah. Do you just think of that on your own though? Like, my brain doesn't just think like that. I'm just like, I'm just living my life, and here's kids, and what do we do? How do we do this? And maybe that was one of my, if I read magazines or parenting books, I would have gotten that.
I don't think I got that from parenting
probably
books.
From business.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't think I got that. Like, parenting books were never like, give your kids more responsibility. It was always more like the, don't do this with your kids, or if they're not doing it by this age, you're broken.
Right.
And I think mine might just be selfish. Like, I really want my kids to be solidly independent when it's time to go, because I'd really like them to go
and not come back.
Kind of, yeah. Like,
don't move back in.
If they don't know how to like manage their money or grocery shop or make food or pay bills or save or whatever some of these bigger skills are, like, if they don't know how to do that and don't do it well, like, I will probably let them back in the house. And I don't think I want to.
I was one of those kids
that didn't know how to do any of that stuff.
Yep. Like, I'm still I can follow a recipe, but I'm not a good cook.
Okay.
And when I was on my own, like before I got married, like I learned how to cook better by having a husband, because he cooks.
Okay.
And I didn't save. I didn't have, I mean, I knew how to budget, but it's like I didn't make very much money. And like I didn't save. I always needed my parents in an emergency. I mean, I was that kind of kid. And my mom, whose job it is to make me happy, always came to my rescue, right? Because she wants me to be happy. And if what being happy meant that they rescued me, then that's what.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I kind of, like, my parents were a little bit more tough love. Like, I remember right after I got, like, so this is fast forward now, I'm a grown adult and whatever, and I was 30 and divorced. And I remember when Christmas, like, sitting in the basement at my parents' house crying because I didn't know if I was going to be able to pay the light bill or pay the daycare bill for my kids. And my parents, who are, you know, very well to do, I remember my dad just put his arm around me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You'll figure it out." You know, and I guess maybe that was how I was raised. I didn't really think about that.
So when he said that, were you like, thanks,
Fuck
Dad.
you!
Yeah.
Give me a check!
Yeah. Were you like, thanks for your belief in me?
At
Or were
the
you like,
time, no. It was like, I wasn't saying those things to like ask for money, but it was like I was saying those things because I really didn't know. And boy, it would have been nice if they would have swooped in to save me.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And what ended up happening 3 months later was that I got a completely different job that completely changed the trajectory of my life for the better.
Yeah.
And so had they swooped in and saved me in that one moment and put a Band-Aid over the problem, I probably wouldn't have had that life-changing career change.
Yeah. My mom has been saving me, and I was in my 30s and she was still saving me.
Okay.
From financial stuff, and
Yeah.
I mean, I've told you before, like how I really relied on my mom as like my expert. It's
Right.
like, what do I think about this? What do I feel? Should I go for this?
Right.
All the things. I'm broke. Money's tight. I'm having a bad time in my marriage. Like, she got all of it, and then and then her job is to like fix it
all. Mm.
And so
I guess I got the imprint on my parenting soul of
yeah.
like,
So it's like I
sucks
have
to
to like
be you,
fight
figure
that
it
at
out.
every. I
Yeah.
have to like fight it at every. It was like I'm not gonna solve this. My instinct is like, oh, solve you or whatever, and it's like I have to like fight it and be like, I'm not gonna solve it. I can trust you. I'm gonna trust you. It hurts me to say that.
And my kids are probably like, "Mom, could you help me a little bit every so often?" And
You're like,
I'm just
"No.
like, "Figure it out. You'll be
Figure it
fine.
out."
You'll be fine. Yeah. Good luck."
Yeah.
Interesting.
So-
Our parents really imprinted on us our parenting DNA.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is like your parents were a certain way with you, and you are kind of like that with your kids, but it's like helpful, and it's like maybe
helpful? I don't know.
Well,
We'll see in
you're
20 years.
capable, like you
Yeah.
have, you were capable, and you figured out your adult life without your parents saving you. So probably your kids might be similar. We'll see.
We'll see.
And
look me up in 20
yeah.
years.
Or like it's not going to be 20. It's going to be like.
I got one that's almost an adult.
I know. It's like he's close.
Yeah.
And my parenting, how I was parented led me to like an adult life of like neediness,
questioning everything.
Yeah, not trusting myself at all. And now I'm trying to break that cycle.
Yeah.
So like we either like try to break this. Our automatic thing is to try to like just do what we know from our upbringing. Or if we think that our upbringing was
totally
shitty or whatever, then we like try to like stop it and then
break the cycle.
Because my husband, the way he is a father is like not the way he was fathered.
Okay.
And so
Yeah,
he has a very conscious like, I am not going to be that way with my sons.
Yeah.
And so his is like, I'm stopping it right now, and I'm being a different way with
Well,
my sons.
so I'm thinking about this. Like, I had the power to be influenced by my mother and my father, and I imprinted, I think, my father's way of being a parent, right? So I didn't take, and I think maybe because my dad's way probably was the default way for the family. And so then now I see with co-parenting with Ken, it's like he is the antithesis of his father. So he's bringing the opposite of his dad, and I'm bringing my dad's version, and together we're trying to like raise these 4 kids.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Good luck, kids.
Good
luck to ya.
You'll need that therapy. Well deserved.
Let's get you signed up today.
Get on a waiting list now.
Right?
Oh, that's funny.
Here's my thing. I did not want to have children, and I am so glad that I did. And it's been one of the most rewarding and frustrating experiences of my life. But I am very grateful to have it, and I'm also very grateful for the fact that I can kind of tune out the chatter from the other parents about what I'm supposed to be doing, and really just try to figure out like how to navigate through this thing on my own.
Yeah, and I wanted to be a mom And then I felt like a failure.
Yeah.
Which is par for the course, because I felt like a failure for everything.
Everything else,
almost.
yeah.
So now my self-care
Yay.
technique is to continue to not feel like a failure.
Yes.
That's my...
Because you're an amazing mom. I watch you interface with your boys and you're a fantastic mom. Like, I'm envious.
I am good at certain
Yes,
things,
you
yes. And my kids are wonderful.
They
They're
are.
smart and they're funny
Yeah.
and they're introspective and they're thoughtful and they are really good kids. They're not fucked up. And they spend a shit ton of time on the computer.
And that's just fine. Thank you very much.
Fine. They're really good at gaming.
There's a great career in gaming. Anyway, I think we're doing it. We're being
Yeah.
parents and taking care of ourselves. And we will never shame anyone or judge anyone for what they are doing.
Well, I mean, I'll try.
Oh.
And then, and if I do, then it's really about me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So,
Cool.
all right.
Yay.
Well.
Wear condoms.
That's not how I was going to end it, but...
or version 2.
I was going to just say bye.
Okay.
And you're like, I was going to be like, bye. And you're like, wear condoms. It's funny. Okay.